Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi, and two big legal topics taking hold of America and, frankly, the world today. First, the Justice Department announcing the filing of federal charges against four Louisville, Kentucky police officers in the death of Breonna Taylor back in 2020, and WNBA basketball star Brittany Griner sentenced to 9 years in a Russian prison for alleged drug smuggling. We'll get into all that. We're going to focus, though, Whitney Traylor, the 9 News legal expert who's joined us many times here on 9 News Plus, joins us today, get a bit of clarity on all this. And Whitney, I do want to start things off and focus in full transparency on the Breonna Taylor charges here, because this is obviously a big deal. Bit of background, by the way, for those of you who might not know, Breonna Taylor was shot to death by police officers in Louisville, Kentucky in 2020 after officers executed a search warrant in her apartment that set off national protests alleging systemic racism in policing, hence the obvious added coverage and insight to this specific case. So, Whitney, getting over to you here finally, why are federal charges so significant in this case, and what does this all mean?
Right. No, you did a great job introducing it. And I would say one clarification before I get to my answer, which was it was a no-knock warrant. So you were correct in saying a warrant, but I wanted to be more specific because the no-knock warrant is really a big issue across the country because of this very situation, how many fatalities there have been. So essentially, this is significant that the Department of Justice, the U.S. attorneys, they have now charged these federal claims against these officers. Now, these are just charges, so they haven't put any defense up yet. And so essentially it was that they used excessive force, and there could be, and the question is, did the excessive force result in death or an attempt to kill? And so that was a charge, falsifying information on the search warrant and obstruction of justice. And so really what this centers on and why this was so egregious was that they actually lied on the search warrant. This is the allegations, and there's significant evidence to substantiate this. So these are the allegations, is that they lied on the search warrant because they were actually looking for Breonna Taylor's ex-boyfriend, who they were alleging was drug dealing. And what they said that justified them getting the no-knock warrant was that they had went to the U.S. Postal Service and confirmed that the ex-boyfriend had in fact received drugs at Breonna Taylor's house. That was disproven. That was not true. In fact, she hadn't, at least according to the DOJ, she hadn't had interaction with her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, for 2 years. And so this was completely botched from the beginning. And then when they executed, they came in with the no-knock warrant. The boyfriend, the current boyfriend who was there, had a legally owned firearm, gave a warning shot, and that's when the three officers returned 32 shots fired. And so they're saying it was excessive force to do that. They lied. The allegations are that they lied on the warrant to get the no-knock warrant, and then they met afterwards to coordinate their story to tell to the investigators. So those are the basis of the DOJ's charges.
So what's next with all this in mind here, Whitney? Is there a normal public case like you would have with a normal court case? And again, sorry if that comes across as a stupid question, but obviously very unique circumstances here.
Right. No, it doesn't come off as a stupid question. And it's essentially, it's a criminal prosecution. And these are allegations of civil rights, excessive force and things like that. So this is just a matter of federal charges. So this is under 42 USC 1983, under color of state law, they used excessive force, these kind of statutes. So it's essentially, on a murder charge, right? And the DA in that county chose not to pursue charges. There was only one charge against one officer, and that was for wanton disregard for the shots that were shot into the neighbor's house. Actually, it wasn't even for the shots fired against Breonna Taylor. So these are just federal charges. The DOJ, this is customary. They're very good attorneys. it will go through the trial process. And if they don't enter a plea, these officers, then they'll face a trial, and they could face, if on the excessive force, if it results in death, or the jury, or they find it was an attempt to kill, then that officer could face life in prison.
Based on perhaps what we heard from Attorney General Merrick Garland today, and also perhaps based on some of the evidence that you've taken a look at, I know this is a difficult question, but what do you think the chances are potentially of a conviction in this case?
Well, I think there is a chance of a conviction. It is hard to convict police. This is still in Louisville. It's in Kentucky. So, you're going to have Southern leaning, juries, if you will. So I think it's going to be difficult. At the same time, there's a lot of movement to hold police accountable. We here in Colorado, we have the police accountability bill that does away a little bit with the qualified immunity and some of these other things. So it's becoming more acceptable to find police officers, liable. Now, I haven't seen all the evidence. There's been no trial. This is just the initial charging document. So, with respect to the defense of these officers, we don't know what their defense is. But I could tell you from what I've seen, it looks, they have an uphill battle, I will say, their defense. So I would suspect there would be a plea, and you could look at, Derek Chauvin, and some of those officers took a plea. And of course, Derek Chauvin went to trial. And so time will tell.
Certainly will. Well, Whitney, with that in mind, I want to kind of turn things over briefly to Brittany Griner, the WNBA star who was arrested in Russia in February, back on charges of smuggling and storing illegal drugs. Again, this took place in Russia. And Brittany Griner today was sentenced to 9 years in prison by a Moscow area court. Now, Griner had vape cartridges that contained hashish oil, which is illegal in the country of Russia. Whitney, I know you may not have a ton of expertise on Russian law and the obvious geopolitical implications here, but any overarching thoughts on this? And also, is there any possibility that international courts or something else is at Brittany Griner's legal disposal here?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm not an expert in Russian law, but I certainly got up to speed on this case. And so, no, I'm not sure that there's any kind of international law that can be used. It seems to me that the best opportunity is some kind of prisoner swap, and the prisoner swap was, and some people have criticized this because the convicted arms dealer Victor Bout, who's known as the Merchant of Death, is who Russia wants, in exchange. And my understanding is that, and I just read in a number of news sources that through back channels or through the process, that the U.S. had in fact offered or been willing to do a prisoner exchange with Victor Bout in exchange for Brittany Griner and former Marine Paul Whelan. And so, but apparently, Russia said no. And so now they've convicted her for 9 years, and it was 2 vapes. And apparently her defense was that she was in a rush and there was no intent. She does have her doctor, there was testimony or information that her doctor, it was medicinal, for medicinal use, and she inadvertently brought them. But apparently the strategy was to go ahead and plead guilty and then seek leniency, because apparently in Russia, it's over 90% conviction rate. And so she could be facing up to 10 years. And so it appears her attorneys gave her that strategy. She of course, fell on the sword, and they convicted her for 9 years. So it was a very harsh penalty. Her attorneys have said that they plan to appeal it and that they were surprised. So others have said, well, this is a political thing. Russia's been accusing the U.S. of getting involved in the war with Ukraine, in support of Ukraine. And so this could be a political situation. So that's the overview. And, I think the best option is to continue to try with the prisoner swap.
So diplomacy, and of course, Whitney, as a legal expert, that may be a little bit on the fringes of
Yeah,
your area of expertise, but certainly we've appreciated having your expertise on here today with the Breonna Taylor case in particular, and also a bit of insight there on Brittany Griner as well.
yeah,
Uh, 9 legal expert Whitney Traylor. I know you'll be on later on today as well on 9 as well. So we
yeah.
appreciate a few minutes of your time, lending us your expertise and some clarity on these really important things that we found out about
Yeah.
here on this Thursday.
And Chris, let me just say one thing really quickly about, because I think it's important to touch on this, because I read a lot about comments and people saying about
Mm.
Brittany Griner, she kneeled for the anthem and she's disrespectful and therefore she shouldn't be coming back. She should experience what it's like, and I would just completely push back on that. And I would say, look, this does highlight this country, the US has a lot of problems, but this case highlights how our system does in fact work. I mean, there's problems, no doubt, but the first 10 amendments, it's a beautiful thing, right? And that was, everybody wants to talk about the Constitution and originalists and going back to the founding fathers. And if you look at their writings, a lot of what they talked about in terms of our democracy is the ability to dissent. And that's why I would even point to the First Amendment, which gave us these rights against the government. It specifically enumerated, said, okay, you shall have the right to petition the government. That means we could, go out and protest, and they can limit that in time, place, and manner and these kind of things. But we have the ability to, have a press, and say things against the government, the ability to assemble, right? These are all things that a lot of countries don't have. And we're looking at this, within Russia. We have here the presumption of innocence. We have the ability, if you can't afford a lawyer, you'll be provided one. These are beautiful rights and liberties. And I think it just highlights that. So for folks to say, well, she should, rot over there, or she should, this is justice. No, she's ensuring our democracy works by protesting, by, peacefully kneeling and saying to the government in a very, out front way, hey, we disagree with what's happening. We disagree with, how the police are treating us. And it's ironic that we're talking about Breonna Taylor, which was one of the reasons that sparked kneeling in the first place. And you have a classic example of the DOJ finding a pattern of practice of discrimination and all these other things. And then, Brittany Griner was actually protesting that. And so we should say, when the Marines, when folks go across country to promote democracy, this is an example of democracy, that somebody can protest and we still fight for them to bring them back, because that's what the foundation of the country is all about. So I just think it's important to really look at the constitutional and the democratic aspect of it. So I wanted to get that in real quick.
Oh, of course, autocracy versus democracy and some of those important distinctions, and we're finding out about them now in the case of Brittany Griner. And we certainly appreciate, Whitney, your insight and also that commentary there, because it's, again, important context in the grand scheme of everything that we've been speaking about here today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and I'm really glad to be able to have more time to flush this out, and I look forward to come back and do it some more.
Oh, absolutely. It's the beauty of 9 Plus. And Whitney Traylor, thank you so much for joining us here again today.
My pleasure.